good. Thank you.
Classroom, right?
He's supposed to be. He was here last night, so. He's in town.
Mark, yeah, did you send out an email this afternoon?
I did, yes. Personal email.
I'm having,
No worries.
I've been having to deal with my emails at home.
Personal email.
Maybe I can read it on my phone.
The majority of his files are vacation and then gets put away for about 3 months. Well, the last year, we never did see it either. Put it away, because there was, we never extended our employees.
So we didn't melt your kids yet? We didn't melt the kids? Oh.
Gary's on his way.
So my question was, is the air conditioning working in the elementary school?
Were they, because Barb Curry sent me an email today, like, oh my gosh, thank you.
That it is working
Yeah,
well?
yes,
Okay.
Testimonial.
because Barb's in one of the newer rooms that have air conditioning, one of the 6 that we redid.
Did an alarm go?
Yes. Well, but I'll tell you, Madison Smith's room would be god-awful after, like,
The youngest, moved out, got married.
Did an alarm go off because the room reached 130 degrees?
no, that was,
This room,
it was the kitchen
Okay.
sensor.
That's how.
He's in the parking lot.
That's what they said at volleyball.
everything's in there.
They came complaining. I said, "You're talking to the wrong guy. I taught for 21 years in a greenhouse. I mean, it was like grew up in one. It's like, yeah, when there wasn't any. When it was all I could do to stay awake in Bob Coy's class when it was 90 degrees.
Then again, we never started school before Labor Day.
Still happening.
But see, this was after Labor Day even. We're after Labor Day, so I said that to some of the other superintendents. I said, "Where's the whole after Labor Day crowd at?"
Ready to go? You want to log in? Okay, so we're going. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:01 p.m. and it is Wednesday, September 6, 2023. We're convening a regular meeting of the Cog Heights Board of Education in the Banner-Ray Media Center. Mr. Muccio, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Decker.
Here.
Mrs. Etter.
Here.
Mr. Suchaki.
Here.
Ms. Prouse.
Here.
Mr. Dobbins.
Here, 5 present, none absent. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome all students, staff, parents, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. The board values and encourages public comment on education issues. Anyone having an interest in the actions of the board may participate during the public comments portion of this meeting. Please identify yourself on the board sign-in sheet. A copy of the board meeting agenda is available to review on our school district's website. Please silence your cell phone during the meeting. And with that, would you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'll make a motion to approve this evening's agenda. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Ms. Decker seconds. Any changes, additions, edits, Mr. Muccio, Mr. Evans?
None on my
Okay.
side of
Well,
it.
with that then, let's move to a vote, please.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Mrs. Decker.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Ms. Prouse.
Motion passes 5-0. We're moving on to agenda item number 3, presentations. Mr. Evans?
And I'll turn it over to Jason Nolde from GPD, and he has a follow-up on the Hillside and the Hillside study, so it's all yours.
Do I need to talk in the mic or?
I think the mic's pretty good. It'll pick it up, so.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. It's been a little while since we've come before the board. We've spent the summer studying the hillside and the soil conditions that we have out here We really wanted to come back now that we've completed that and made some recommendations, some findings and recommendations to give you an update, kind of walk you through that process in terms of how we, what we analyzed, and then ultimately kind of what were some of the findings. I want to start first with introductions. You guys have not yet met Del Channels. He leads our geotechnical group at GPD, and he's our lead geotechnical engineer, so he's our expert when it comes to this. So, I mean, I guess first, we understand, the importance of this. This is almost kind of like your lifeblood, that it's, it's holding up, in some respects, some of your buildings in some aspects. So really being comfortable and ensuring that we've got, we don't have major concerns associated with the hillside is something that's really critical and to the longevity of the buildings themselves. So the agenda that we put together, I'll walk you through our approach to the study and what we did. Review with you in sort of a non-technical basis as we can the findings that we had, and then what our recommendations are and sort of next steps associated with that. So what kind of led us to come here? Staff had pointed out that they've witnessed some cracks in some areas of the building, and with its location, with the building's locations along the hillside, we wanted to ensure that there wasn't some sort of sliding that was happening or movement of the buildings that was causing some of this cracking. So this was the germination of the root of the study to start to take a look at the hillside. And then we understand the general conditions, and I touched on it. We've got this topography change that happens between the parking levels and the athletic fields and the track that creates that hillside, and it, and in particular by the natatorium there and the pools, it's built directly into the hillside. So there's definitely, I really like the analogy that it is that kind of that lifeblood. It's supporting the buildings themselves, so it's a critical piece to the overall campus. So this is our overall, mapping of analysis that we did. The items that you see there with a B dash and the kind of the hash mark there, or the cross mark, those are locations that we did some geotech boring. So I'll show you a picture of what that looks like here in a minute, but that tells you where we took some drill rigs and we actually dug through and pulled up the soil to analyze the condition of what we have there. The WCs, those are our Wildcat test probes, I guess you can call it. So because of the topography change that we have there, the drill rigs, we can only get in certain locations. So those are, you'll see, those are sort of hand test holes that we did. And then each one of these profiles are some analysis that we then took back and we did, that Dell's team did, to kind of look at what kind of conditions we have there. So this gives you kind of an idea of what we're working with. The image on the left there, that's a picture of a drill rig that Dell's team would use to kind of drill down to the depth that they would recommend to then start to pull that out and to analyze what we see there. And then the image on the right, this is kind of the Wildcat test probe that we talked about. That's the hand testing mechanism that we use for doing work where it's inaccessible for the drill rig. So the other aspect that we analyzed as well is we installed some of these piezometers. See, I knew I was going to get it wrong. And so those are kind of like PVC pipes, and those are actually still in the ground. And they, what we do is we installed 9 total. Those help us measure some of the groundwater elevations that we have as well. So that's part of the overall analysis that we did on the hillside. In addition, where we did identify some of those cracks, We installed crack monitors at those locations so that we could monitor if there is any continuing movement, you know. So we've obviously see that there's a crack in the floor in some locations, and we want to keep an eye on it to ensure that those are not getting larger and there's not overall movement that's happening within the building. So I'm going to turn this over to Del to kind of go through some of the findings that we had. I wanted to start off by saying, though, that there are some areas of concern. There are some, in our recommendations, we do have some areas that we are recommending. We do provide some stabilization, but there was not anything that we felt was, you know, an immediate danger that needed, you know, that we had to shore up the buildings immediately or, you know, close off a section of the school or anything like that. So I wanted to, I guess, you know, bring that to a little, give you a little bit of comfort to that. In addition, the cracks that we saw, those are not specific to building movement with the hillside. So those are actually areas of the building that were built up that used to be actually originally designed as a roof, and then the addition came along and turned that eventually into a corridor. And you know, so what really is happening is some of the movement, you know, wasn't designed for the live load of people walking across it. So some of the bar joists are, you know, structurally it's not a concern that it's going to collapse, but there is some movement that is causing the surface tiles to crack. So there is some cosmetic cracking that does look concerning, but ultimately structurally is not.
If you went back to that one of the first pictures, that was the roof area that's white. That was kind of a pure white. It kind of tees out. That's the addition that went on in 1985 here with the math rooms and the science labs. So that's the last addition that went on in this building.
So there are ways that we could tie the structure together to eliminate some of that, but it's not something that, again, structurally is an immediate concern that needs to be addressed. And then we also, which I didn't have a picture of, but there was also some wall movement down by the natatorium there, by the stair. So we did look at that as well, and that, again, it was not a condition of necessarily that the hillside's moving, but that there was backfill. We actually did a core sample there as well. There was backfill behind the stairs that's putting pressure on that wall that's causing it to kind of bow inwards, and that wall wasn't designed to carry any backfill. It wasn't reinforced. So we just had our pre-bid meeting to, you know, we did already do the design and engineering fix associated with that, and so we are soliciting bids through, you know, the public procurement process associated with that. So that's an overall kind of to give you a little bit of comfort, but Del, if you don't mind kind of walking through that.
So again, this study was started because of cracking that was noticed in a few locations. The good news is the cracking is not related to slope movement. So that would have been a very bad situation. That could have been like, okay, we can't use this part of the building. So that's all very good news. What we did find, though, as part of the study is that what's called the safety factor for the slope isn't up to modern design standards. So the easiest way to explain a safety factor is when we design something, we design it to not be just barely safe, but to have excess capacity. So that, say for instance, a building experiences a temporary loading that's higher than what's expected. Maybe there's a mild earthquake here. It can handle that because it has excess safety factor. So for slopes, modern design standard is considered to be a 1.5. So you want to have 50% more capacity than what is needed for that slope. And that safety factor, some of the things that drive that is going to be the angle of the slope. So the steeper the slope, the lower the safety factor is going to get. What the loading is on the slope, and that's predominantly the foundation of the building. And then the soil strength and the groundwater conditions, because those play a role in how much the soil can then resist those driving forces. So 1.5 is the desired safety factor for modern design. A 1.3 or 1.25 to 1.3, that would be considered for a building lower than desired, but it's not considered like an immediate critical thing that is really concerning. Below 1.25, that's more concerning, because we really have less than half of the excess capacity that we would want. So what we found on the areas that we looked at, so profile 5, we'll start with that. That is the area of the natatorium. So that's shown right there. We actually ran a couple of different profiles, one north and one south of that line, to take a look at those safety factors with the natatorium. And what we end up finding, if you want to scroll back to is that the safety factors range from 1.16 to 1.28. So that was, definitely was concerning to us. It was lower than what would be recommended, or even what would be considered marginally adequate. And looking into studying the records there, we did find that the original geotechnical evaluation had recommended that those foundations be deepened. This was how long ago, Jason, when that building was built?
Nearly 50 years ago.
50 years ago.
78.
So a long time ago, they had recommended those foundations be deepened, and for whatever reason, they weren't. So had it been built per those recommendations, I don't think we'd be looking at something that would be significantly better than it is. But we're dealing with what was built. So we have a lower safety factor than what's desired. The middle area, profiles 3 and 4, so you want to
Sorry, Del, real quick. The
Yeah, sure.
1.16 was at the south wall or the north wall? Do you remember?
The 1.16, I believe, is the north part of the natatorium, so north of that profile
Okay.
line. And it kind of makes sense if you look at the building's angled a little bit. So the north part of the natatorium sits higher up on the hill. So the hill has to provide more support to that part of the building.
Right.
So, yes, good question. So profiles 3 and 4, you can see that section of the building sits much farther back from the top of the slope. So in analyzing that area, we have in excess of a 1.5. So that meets modern slope stability recommendations. So we're saying there's nothing that needs to be done relative to the slope in that central area. Then in the north area, we ran the 2 profiles, 1 and 2. That part of the building, it sits closer to the top of the slope, but not right on the slope. And we had safety factors of 1.28 and 1.27 there. So again, it's better than the natatorium. It's not as good as that central area. So now this slide here, this is showing this is an output from our slope stability analysis. So the green arrows are loading conditions from the building and the floors. This is the natatorium area. That gray T that is closest to the slope, that's the outside wall, and then the bottom of the T, that's the foundation. And what the computer models is, what is the weakest spot on that slope that could cause movement? So the white lines are all kind of showing areas that would be moving if this were to fail. Now again, it's not failing. We have safety factors of 1.16 and 1.28. So we have more capacity than what is needed right now, just not as much as we would desire. Even the middle section where we had a safety factor of 1.6, we would see a similar printout on the computer modeling from that. But again, it shows that we have significantly more capacity than is needed. Here, our excess capacity is lower than what we would desire.
And we also ran this with different ground levels.
We had
or
looked at,
groundwater levels
yes,
as
because
well.
groundwater level is something that will affect stability. The higher the groundwater level, the less stability you're going to have because it's going to weaken the soil. So we'd initially looked at some options of putting in a drainage system under the pool. we knew the pool was slated for some repair, and we thought, well, we could put in a drainage system under there, kind of intercept any groundwater and lower that groundwater level. What our modeling showed us was it was helping, but it wasn't achieving the increased capacity that we were desiring. And it was getting more and more expensive the deeper you would go. So we couldn't physically get deep enough to lower the water level sufficiently to actually get a significant return on the stability that we were looking for. So then we started looking at other options.
Okay, so that leads us to recommendations. So those two blue lines that you see there, those were our initial areas of stabilization that was being recommended through the studies that we did. Obviously, as Del pointed out with the areas near the natatorium, there was concerns there, so showing some, which we'll touch on here, how we would do that, but some stabilization there. And then on the other side to the north as well, that actually extended into the bleachers initially, again, just based on calculations. So we further then looked at and revised some of the calculations if we weren't going to impact the bleachers because of kind of the domino effect of starting to make improvements there. And we found that we could actually pull that blue line back so it's not impacting the bleachers as well. So that's ultimately what our recommendations will be. Del touched on already, we looked at maybe some dewatering options to try to facilitate that, and that ultimately didn't turn out to be a successful solution. So then we started looking at other means to reinforce the hillside. Sheet pilings, like you see on some roadway projects or some deeper projects that are downtown that require retention of earth is one means. Or you could look at this SRT plate pile system, which was our alternative measure, which turned out to be cost savings relative to what our initial approach was, which was the sheet pilings. That sheet pilings one also, if you know, is pretty disruptive as well. It's pretty noisy. It's one of the loudest construction activities I think we've got. So
It would have required going into the bleachers also. Yeah, there wasn't any way around it with the sheet piling system.
you want to touch on, I guess, the differences a little bit?
Yeah, so they both work in a similar manner. You're driving in a steel reinforcing member vertically into the ground. It goes deep enough into the ground that it gets into the stable soils. So then it will act kind of like a fence post, so to speak, where it's driven into the ground enough that you can push on the top of it and it doesn't tip over. Well, the sheeting is doing that, except the entire sheeting is below grade, and the top part of the sheeting is what's keeping that slope from wanting to move. It's providing additional strength. So the traditional sheet piling, which is the upper picture, that's continuous metal that is going to be running from one end to the other and going down probably 30 or 40 feet, and it was going to also require some additional tie-back reinforcement, which all that was leading to additional cost. So the plate pile system, it's a newer type of slope reinforcement. ODOT utilizes it extensively for roadway slope problems. There's local contractors that install this system. They have task orders where if they get a road slip on a Friday, they can potentially be out there the following week and installing these things into the ground, because once the ground starts to slip, it doesn't stop, and it's just going to make progress. So if they can catch it early, then it doesn't slip back into the road, doesn't create a hazardous condition. Ultimately, it's best to fix it before it moves too much. So the system, it's a series of steel. They're called H pile members. It kind of has the shape of an H. It's driven into the ground, and then it has a metal plate welded on the top of it. So that's the part that's reinforcing the slope. So they put a series of these in the ground, and I think there was 3 or 4 rows were being proposed to be installed. For the area where the bleachers are, they're able to jog up the slope and install them in the asphalt area, so they're not disturbing the bleachers, so the bleachers don't, they don't get touched or disturbed, which also saves on the cost. And then once they're installed, both areas of the building would, when you look at the slope stability safety factor, they're now at or above 1.5 because you're getting the combination of the soil strength and then the strength of the steel combining together to provide that excess capacity.
So what does that look like? Obviously, the immediate question is what kind of budgetary impact does that have? So we broke it down into the 2 sections that were identified that needed some potential stabilization. The south wall is the one that we have more concerns over, and the one that, is recommended that something within the next 5 years, be done, or at least we plan for. Where the north wall, again, that was closer to that, that 1.25, that, it makes sense, potentially to incorporate that, but we had less concerns over that one over the other. So if you wanted to look at both together, there's a little bit of cost savings associated with that. So together they would be the 364, try to show you the worst case scenario for that. We recommend carrying also, that's kind of like the construction costs associated with it. So if you're budgeting, from the board's perspective, carrying soft costs with it as well, contingencies and permit fees, et cetera. For a project like this, we're recommending 25%. So you can see what from a budgetary standpoint, what we're recommending if we utilize both stabilization areas.
One of the concerns is about the water issue. Will these safety factors hold even if, worst case scenario, we don't ever solve the water problem?
Yes, this would be safety factors that are modeling the existing water conditions, which are elevated. Now, are they coming from natural sources? Probably a combination of natural sources and maybe leaks somewhere. Yes, but we've modeled it based upon those water conditions. If in the future that it was discovered that there was a leak somewhere and it's fixed, then that's just going to further increase the safety margin. But it's designed to engineer around the existing condition.
So just to follow up on Mr. Young's point, if the source of this water or seepage were located and remedied, and I know this is ballparking, but what do you think, or how do you think that would impact the safety factor ratings as they currently stand? In other words, if you basically raise that, or you lower the groundwater table, how would that impact the safety factor ratings that you've currently?
Yeah, for the north
Conducted.
profile, it wasn't going to be as much because we weren't seeing water levels as high there, and the building's farther back from the slope. For the natatorium, it would have a greater effect. It all would depend on how, if a leaking water source was cut off, how far does the water level drop? And
Right.
there's no way of knowing that, but we did, when we were modeling it, we modeled a 5-foot reduction in the water level at the natatorium, and that brought us up from the 1.16 to about a 1.24, 1.23. So it still was under the 1.25.
Sure.
So far under the 1.5.
So is it plausible or possible that there could be enough of a benefit from remedying whatever water leakage is going on, such that this would get closer to, or might actually get to the 1.5, the 1.5 safety factor?
It wouldn't be able to reach a 1.5. The water level could drop to the field level, far below the building, and it would still be, it would be, I think, the second model we looked at was a 10-foot drop below the existing existing water level, and that was, we were around a 1.3.
Could you just briefly comment on the type of testing that was done on these bore samples of the water that was found and what the chemical composition of the water might be?
I believe, and Jason, you were more involved with that than I was, but I believe we had sampled water from the storm drain, where water's continuously running. And it did include, in the analysis, it showed that it contained fluoride, which is the marker that we typically look for, because fluoride doesn't disperse like chlorine. So it did show elevated fluoride in it, indicating that a significant amount of that water was coming from a potable water source somewhere.
Okay. And that's in the storm drain of
In
the
the
sewer running
storm
behind the building?
drain, yes.
But how about the
Yes.
test bore samples?
I don't believe we tested that, because that's, the water that's flowing through the soil is flowing very slowly, plus the soil will react with the water and can change the chemical makeup.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be a clear cut, if we were to test it, I don't think we could come up with a clear cut answer saying that, X percentage of this water is due to a water leak somewhere.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you seen any seasonality changes in the piezometer water levels at all? Or you haven't
I
looked that
don't believe
close?
we've seen much change with the water level, which is, with a natural water condition, that's pretty typical. You usually don't see large changes in a groundwater flow. It'll tend to go up a little bit in the spring and summer, and then late fall and into winter, it drops a little bit. And that's pretty much what we've seen.
So I'm going to kind of get a little bit into the weeds here, but my understanding is that some of these older communities have what are called combined sewers.
Yep.
Storm and sanitary are combined into one. And one of the questions I'm wondering about is whether it's possible that the water that's flowing through that particular pipe is maybe coming from a source that's essentially a combined sewer system, and that might be what, and I'm just curious to know if you have any thoughts on that, and if there's, if that might be the source somewhere outside the physical grounds of this building, but nonetheless carrying water from a combined sewer system through our area, as opposed to having some type of a source that's within our grounds that's from some type of a chlorinated water leak, is the best way I can say it.
Theoretically, yes, if you have a combined sewer carrying potable water that has been processed through a building, it's still, the fluoride is still in it. So theoretically, yes, that could be flowing into a sewer that is then, it's in a storm sewer, but it's picking up combined from somewhere. So potentially, yes.
Okay.
But
So,
I don't think it would dump into a storm, then it would go into the sanitary. It's a combined system that, then ultimately became separated at some point. The fault is to stick it with the sanitary.
okay.
Yeah, your storm system, I would think, would be independent of any external sources, although if you had a leaking combined sewer somewhere that was then somehow getting into your storm, because your storm also has a leak.
Right.
These are all possible explanations, but finding water sources and water leaks is always a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
So if we said we wanted to wait or we didn't do anything right now, are these safety factors potentially gonna get lower? Is that the right, or worse? I don't know what
The safety factor would typically not change. What can change is the loading condition. I gave the example of an earthquake. We don't typically have earthquakes here, but every now and then we have a little one. Or we have a record snow that has 4 feet of snow under it. That's an additional load. So that could temporarily lower the safety factor below what we're seeing now.
But the changes on the hillside, if there's if the water continues and.
Yes, with as things are happening right now, no, it shouldn't change anything. As long as you don't have like an active seep that's with water flowing out of the hillside and causing erosion. That would be a concerning thing, but I'm sure the maintenance folks would immediately call Jason and say, hey, this new development is just arrived.
And you said you could provide us with a checklist that we can regularly, assess the building condition. We're not seeing movement as.
Yes, watching, like similar to what started this entire study, was the observation of some cracked areas. So something similar to that, but with some more focus on these are the areas that we really want to look at. Like for the natatorium, we have, it's brick exterior walls. The nice thing about brick and masonry is if the ground is starting to move, they will show a crack. And they'll show a crack fairly quickly. And I don't think any cracking of note has been observed on any of those walls, which again is that's a good sign that even though we don't have the excess capacity, we don't have an actual slip occurring. So yeah, we can provide like a documented inspection protocol for some of these areas.
Jason, I wasn't here when the band wall started to move. Do you think that was related to this, or was it completely separate?
That was, yeah, so that condition at the band wall was similar to the auditorium wall, which was the masonry, the brick that was installed didn't account for enough movement, so there's always thermal movement that's happening, or even with the wind. And we have to have so many control joints spacing, and we did not have that here. And so adding those control joints then now, will prevent that cracking from happening again, but we didn't have that, and that's what caused some of that movement and some of the cracking that we realized.
Those are important, these elements that show on the floor.
Absolutely.
And those two very different projects.
Yeah.
So, given what we've discussed here, and we all, the district included, we all have to operate within limited resources, so would it be prudent, in your view, to think about some type of a periodic monitoring campaign or program that would periodically, whatever you do something of a test to figure out if there's any movement or if these safety factors have changed to the negative? Or is that an imprudent approach?
Well, again, I think our recommendation that I mentioned is that we should address the natatorium wall sometime within the next 5 years.
Okay.
And if you can't, because of limited resources, can't do it immediately, that's where the monitoring protocol that we talked about takes place. The situation we could find ourselves in if we do start to see some evidence is then we are now dealing with maybe, emergency shoring, shutting down areas of the building, making it non-accessible to students and teachers. So, at that point, then it's almost kind of, we're reacting too late, so we're recommending to try to be proactive with this, if it's feasible.
Okay.
When you say the natatorium wall, is it the north wall? Or is it?
Well, it's that run, that entire run of the
West facing,
yeah,
the west facing wall right out here, the opposite side of that.
the one that goes right into the hill.
That's the north wall, or is that?
No,
That's the natatorium wall?
That's the
That's what I'm
natatorium wall.
calling the natatorium wall.
Okay.
Yeah, the north wall is up by the bleachers.
Does the weight of having water in the pool affect the safety factor ratings? In other words, just the literal weight, whether the pool is empty or filled, does that have a bearing on
And
these?
we actually looked at that, and it's almost.
It's inconsequential? Okay, all right, thank you. Jason, your firm has been very active in helping us put together a kind of a master strategic plan for facilities improvements. And what I'm thinking, what I'm hearing is that in terms of what we would have put in that 5-year bucket, this is one part, if not all of this, is one of those items that you would recommend basically go into that 5-year bucket, whereas I think previously it hadn't yet made the cut. Now it
Correct.
unfortunately has.
Right.
Perhaps. Okay. In the meantime, is it possible that if the district is successful and if there is some type of an external leak, and identifying that and remedying it, that it might, I understand from Dell that it's not likely to put us at a 1.5 safety factor rating, but that it might inch us up closer to a 1.25, maybe a 1.3 rating if a source of water leakage, seepage, whatever was identified and remedied, that is, that the water table is lowered? Is that a, kind of a, it's not an either or, it's watch and wait, but then also during that time, try to take the time to explore avenues as to where this, if there is a water leakage problem, where it's coming from?
I guess
Or is that wasted effort on
I'm
your
gonna
part?
try to ask this question a little bit differently. I guess from your perspective, how confident are you that the groundwater is just groundwater that would, it's not, maybe it's being added to based on potentially some sort of leakage, but it, you have any sense of, any feel for that at all in terms of?
We deal with a lot of gut feelings in the geotech world because we're analyzing something that you can't see or touch other than the discrete spots that you test. So my gut feeling in this is that, there's a water leak somewhere, and it's driving water into the storm system.
Mhm.
And I think that it probably has minimal effect on the groundwater level of the natatorium.
Oh, okay.
I think that the groundwater level of the natatorium is more of a natural water flow that for thousands of years has flowed in that direction, and is probably, with the construction of the school, I'm guessing that there was a hillside there that was steepened somewhat to create the level area for the building, that now has created almost a catch that has caused the water level to rise up to the condition that it's at now.
Okay.
Do you think it could have contributed to the voids into the pool?
That's another good question. Not sure. If a void can form because we've had water movement that's carrying soil away, could also, this type of a void could form if the pool bottom was placed over soil that wasn't solid, and it has settled in certain areas. So it could be one or the other. Now, without seeing evidence of, again, water seepage coming out of the hillside carrying sediment, it doesn't have any definite appearance of water pulling soil out from under the pool. That's not a,
Yeah.
not a, it's kind of talking circles.
And I would say that 3 years ago, that before we fixed a lot of the piping in the pool area, that the pools was, and correct me, Johnny's in the room if I'm wrong, Johnny, I think we were losing about an inch a night at one point, which is a considerable amount of water at that time. And then when we repaired some of the piping, and so my summation might be that there was so much water being lost through some piping issues that I think that contributed more to the washout, some of the voids underneath. Again, perfect world, I had talked to Jason about that, if we have some success with this levee, to actually to go ahead with the hillside, as soon as swim season's over, to open the pool up, and, because we can do that in March and April, and you have the voids filled, and then do the follow-up with the hillside right after, that summer there, this next summer. Because quite honestly, while that price is not, that's not a sale price, but those are only gonna go up in time, so I'd like to, and I think that's a foundation for us to move forward on some other issues then. If we know that we've got the hillside shored up and we've got the pool, the voids filled in the pool, I think that those are two solid fixes that allow us to start moving to some other areas of the district.
Is that like a 4-week project or maybe
Well,
2-week, 4-week project?
nice transition, thank you. So, if, I just, to try to give you all the information, I try to map out what it could look like. We could do, some of the design and engineering, if you'd like us to, in the fall here, and try to, do bidding, either late this year or early in '24 to set up, to have a contractor do work in the summer. The actual construction activity is estimated to be about 6 weeks, so plus or minus. The design and engineering, final components of that to get to a biddable set of documented
plans would be approximately 4 weeks after we get a go-ahead. So that gives you some time frame in terms of what it may look like. I can tell you, there is some, I think, advantage, competitive advantage to bidding it like this in advance to give people some backlog of work for 2024. I think they do bid things a little bit more competitively that way to have that assurances, let alone, with labor shortages to ensure that we have a contractor on board, so, that, because otherwise a lot of their activities do ramp up in the summer, as you can imagine, so, we can certainly, fit this in however, but I want to give you a little bit of a picture of what the engineering and the construction.
The old be that we had done all the prep work up, and so then we're talking in January and February about the day school lets out, that we're gonna start on that hillside. So that's a good 4-month lead, and the construction company knows what they need to do. They know what our expectation is for them to be in here at that time, as opposed to, while we're finishing up a job down the street, and, we want to set a concrete starting date to do that.
So Dale, you explained previously the, kind of the lack of value that one gets from doing chemical analysis of these test boreholes, the waters in the test boreholes, that it may yield some results or it may not, is kind of how I'm understanding it. Do you see any merit at this point, in this juncture, given that the holes already been drilled? Do you see any merit in taking samples and having them tested, or do you think that the results that we would get would just not yield any benefit?
I think that's another good question. I think I would want to do a little research into that further. Because I think we had, wasn't E. coli also discovered in the storm sewer water? Am I thinking of it?
That was the first test that came back from the water department,
Okay.
down here had
That
the
wasn't-
E. coli, but
That
they,
wasn't our test, but
that was the sewer districts, and they were gonna come over, and they haven't come over to give us an explanation of what their thoughts on that were yet.
okay.
They just sent us the report back.
Because that is something that can be discovered in groundwater, which is would possibly be a clue that there might be some connection between the water that we're seeing in the storm and then the water that's in the ground.
My takeaway right now is that they're not related circumstances, or at least we don't think that they're related circumstances, but we wait to be proven wrong, so to speak, or proven that they are in fact related events, is kind of what I'm understanding, or thinking I'm understanding.
Right. And again, even, I feel that if there is a water source that's due to leakage, we cut that off, it's going to help, but I don't think it's gonna help a lot in the area of the net.
So we have a running track, it's a very high-quality running track. Would that in any way be affected or damaged by the heavy equipment that would have to come in and do this STR or SRT pilings process?
Yes, that would be, I believe the contractors had looked at that and didn't feel that they would be having to operate directly on the equipment, on the track
On
itself.
the track, okay, good.
That would be a clarification that we would need to make, because if they are needing to be down there, they're gonna have to take measures to protect it.
Of course.
And they've been notified that that's not a normal track, that's a real soft, that's the softest pour track that you can put into a facility, so that's a little more susceptible to, it has a little more difficult, which is why the only vehicles you see on it are our utility vehicles. You don't see cars or trucks or anything out on our track. I think Frank back there's the only thing that he drives down there is the golf cart sometimes, and we really limit on what we put on the track because it is such a soft pour.
Yeah, and that's another positive of the SRT system, is that it can be installed off of long reach excavators. So that's how they do the road slip repair so quickly. They just drive up on the road gets closed temporarily, and they're reaching down with installing these piers down the slope. So that would be a follow-up question I think we could have with the one contractor that we were consulting with, helping to get some initial pricing that for the natatorium area, that they weren't gonna be having to work off of the track at all. And I don't believe they were. I think they were
Okay.
gonna be able to come in on either end of the building to
So would it be safe to say, and having heard all of this, the detailed discussion, that the real issues here is that the building was constructed to older standards, right? That in some cases may not have even been followed as well as they should have been.
Yep.
Coupled with time, it's old. You know, we're going back at least 50 years, or 45 years in some of this. That's what's really hit the problem here. That's what's brought us to this point. Is that fair to say it that way? Or am I simplifying it too
No,
much?
I would say that it's fair to say that 50, 60 years ago, it was, when the original part of the building was built, there was probably no geotechnical engineering analysis done. They followed the normal construction standards of the day. For the natatorium, they did do a geotechnical evaluation, but then didn't follow all the recommendations.
Right. So those two things coupled with time has got us to
Yeah.
where we are.
Yep.
Okay. Because someday I have to explain this to people, and I want to be able to say it in a way they'll understand it.
Yes.
They're not going to understand the 45-minute presentation. They're not going to get it. But if I can say it in 45 seconds and make a point, and it's valid, just, you know, it's an engineer said this is right,
Yeah.
then that helps. Thank you.
Apparently, you're all either engineers in your day life, or you were paying a lot of attention in science classes in school, because you've asked very good questions.
You do have one, but
Just one more question. With the SRT system, a north and south wall, I know it's not continuous, but we don't have any condition, or any concern about water funneling in between in the bleachers and,
That's another good question, and that's another positive of the SRT system. If you put in a traditional sheeting wall, it acts like a dam. Well, the SRT system, you have a reinforcement element here and one here, and open space between, so the water is free to just
Yes.
flow right around it. So it doesn't interfere with the current groundwater flow.
I think that was our concern back in April, March, when Jason talked about the sheet pile.
Yes.
Okay. And then also, what's the lifespan of the SRT? I mean, it's obviously beyond our, I'm sure, a while, but,
That's
and is there any kind of maintenance? You have to tie it back
No,
every
there-
so
there-
often, or?
There's no maintenance. The only limiting element there is gonna be corrosion. Typically, any type of a below-grade steel reinforcement element it's rated for at least 100 years, so.
So we're gonna get a
Yeah.
100-year guarantee?
I'm sure they.
I hope you're around to check them on it, Maria.
Yeah, it won't corrode within the first 100 years.
I'll be back on my spirit line.
So Jason, based on the presentation, do you see anything that is, the decision about whether we go forward with this improvement or this, whatever, this improvement project, it ties into our master facilities plan. And I'm just curious to know, would that, if our decision about going forward and making this improvement, would it impact your assessment of other pieces of this facilities improvement plan? In other words, is this almost a precondition that we need to think about getting this done before anything else, or ahead of the pack? Or should we think about it as being, we can do it, we cannot do it, we take a chance if we don't, et cetera?
I think no matter, if you're staying committed to this location, no matter what you decide to do, even tearing down portions, I think stabilizing those portions of the hill would be prudent and would be, a good investment. And it is kind of the precursor to, the other, any other improvements that we do, so,
So it's almost like, the analogy is building a house, that you first have to have a good foundation upon which to build. And we're almost saying that we have to kind of reinforce our foundation in order to make these other improvements that we're talking about making, building improvements. And that's why I just kind of put this in the right context, is of whether,
But if
how optional it is or isn't.
we didn't have the load on that hill, though, that would change the safety factor.
yeah.
If you eliminate the building, yes. The hill itself would have well, for one thing, without a building there, it only needs to have a 1.3, not a 1.5, but it would probably be closer to the 1.5 without that building.
and going back to the cracks in the floor, they are not a concern.
again, so if you, really what's going on there is, that's the point where a couple of bar joists are coming together.
Right.
And as you're putting load in the middle, where wasn't designed for that live load, it's flexing right there, and that's what's causing that surface cracking in the tiles there. So we could stabilize that and eliminate it, but it's not structurally known.
Not a structural concern. That's what I thought. I just want to make sure
Yep.
I heard that
It's
correctly.
cosmetic,
Okay.
obviously, but,
Filling in the cracks, is
Yeah.
that what you were talking
Not
about?
filling them in, just the fact that they're there.
that's everything I had put together, just so. I mean, you
Okay.
Very good.
obviously been asking questions throughout, which we appreciate, but if there's anything else, let us know.
Thank you. I usually don't do this, but tonight, given the experts that we have here and the significance of what we're discussing, is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question of these two gentlemen? I ordinarily wouldn't do this, but I would ask it tonight. Okay. Mr. Senta?
Rick? No?
All right. Well, with that, thank you both very much for coming in and answering our questions and helping me get a better perspective for context. Thank you. We appreciate it. Thanks very much. With that, I'm going to move to agenda item number 4, comments from the public. Is there anyone this evening who would like to speak or address the board? Okay, if not, then I'm going to move to agenda item number 5, and I hereby move that the board adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORC section 121.22G4, which is for preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Ms. Prouse gets a second. Mr. Muccio, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Prouse.
Aye.
Mrs. Decker.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Sajak.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 at 6:55 PM, and we are adjourned to executive session. We good? Yes. Okay, we're all set? Okay, so it is 8:01 PM and we are reconvening from executive session. Mr. Muccio, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Decker?
Here.
Mrs. Etter?
Here.
Mr. Souchaki?
Here.
Ms. Prowse?
Here.
Mr. Dobbins?
Here, 5 present, none absent. Moving on to agenda item 6, Mr. Muccio, Treasurer's Business.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbins. Just 3 items for approval tonight, items 6A, 6B, and 6C in the consent agenda.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the Treasurer's consent agenda items, please?
So moved.
Mr. Souchaki moves, I'll second. Mr. Muccio, any discussion?
Item 6A, new vendors, just 2. The first would be, as I open our lead sheet, Overnight Geek Company. I had actually put Greek Company, and then, thank you, Mrs. Etter, for filling that. And then that was for our internet safety student presentation, and Mark L. Sundberg for special education assessments that we have, approximately $500 per year is the estimate for that. Closing out of that, 6B, purchase orders, just 1, and that's for a blanket purchase order for our elevator service, $5,445.60. And then we have 6C, then and now, just 2 invoices dated before the purchase order date on those.
Are there any questions for Mr. Muccio? If not, then let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Souchaki?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye.
Mrs. Decker?
Aye.
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Ms. Prowse?
Motion passes 5-0. We're on to agenda item 8, Mr. Muccio, discussion.
Yep, just 2 items. The first one is just the levy info. I'm just going to include for every board meeting, and it just talks about all the specifics that would deal with the levy, the breakdown, what the levy would cost, what will the levy fund, and why do schools rely on levies, for anybody to go back and reference. And second item was our audit. So I spoke with Megan, our audit manager, who works under Matt Goldman, who's the senior audit manager. They're wrapping up our fiscal '22 audits. They're looking at exit conferences that they would have. We do those when they finish the audit. Initially, I threw out our board meeting on September 20th, and Megan said she can't make that. She's going to be in Columbus that day. She's leaving about 4:30, so she's not 100% sure she can make it. But I threw out the next board meeting of October 4th, and she was going to check with Matt Goldman on that one, so we'll know some more of when they want to set that up. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Muccio? If not, let's move to agenda item number 9, Mr. Evans.
Okay, on the consent agenda, I ask that items 9A, B, and C, items 10A and B, items 11A and B be approved via the consent agenda.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda items, please?
So moved.
Mr. Souchaki moves, I'll second. Mr. Evans, any discussion?
Just the, under 9, that's the purchasing, that allows us some group purchasing on some items. B is the contract with Lori Garrett for the BEST committee. C is the kindergartners field trip to Luther's Farm every year, their annual field trip to Luther's Farm. Under the general business, for Tracy Deal to be, join the Educational Office Professionals of Ohio, and then also to approve her attendance at their conference. What I will be bringing before the board, and when Matt and I can sit down and work on it at some point in time, is in the exempt benefits package to some, for any of the exempt benefits people to be a certain amount of maybe dollars for membership for professional organizations to allow for professional growth. This is an organization that Sandy Riley was a member of and did some, in the night, it's tough sometimes to find PD for support staff. I don't know how it is in Matt's office with the treasurers, with some of the assistant treasurer and payroll, but sometimes they need to be members of an organization to get PD that they need. So I certainly want to encourage that for those employees, just like we do our rest of our staff. Supplemental position contracts on Chath, there's a volunteer and I just think just 2 positions on that. One's a volunteer coach and
8th grade football?
8th grade football.
Assistant?
Yes. Yeah, Corey Schmidt helped with 8th grade football, and volunteer Alex Krinoff, who's been a huge asset to us moving forward. And Grace Brown, marching band director. this is a 1-year, her and Noah both hold the title marching band directors. This was a way to get her compensated. They have an additional staff member. The thought that in the past that John Sokol supervised 70 or 80 students with a couple volunteers was that we don't have those kind of numbers anyplace else for anything else that we do in the district. I will tell you that when we negotiate, and I've already talked to Johnny about this, that we'll look to create an assistant band director's position as well as a band director's position. So that will kind of work itself out moving forward. But this is a way to get Grace compensated because she helps the band, and it's good to have 2 staff members there. We still love the volunteers, but that's a lot of kids to manage on a Friday night. So and we appreciate Grace for wanting to step in and do that. So those are the items I asked for approval.
Okay, great. Are there any follow-up questions for Mr. Evans?
I just have one point on 9B. I think it's misstated in the recommended action. It should say at a cost not to exceed, rather than a cost of 15,000. It's a not to exceed. Is that correct? I mean, I looked at the detail and that's what it said.
Well, then let me go in and change that. Cost, at a cost.
That's what it says in the first
To-
attachment.
Right, the attachment says not to exceed, right.
Okay, I've changed it to say not to exceed. So if you hit your refresh, it should show up that way. So that would be what the board approves.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Evans?
I don't have any.
If there are none, let's move to a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Souchaki?
Aye.
Mr. Evans?
Aye.
Mrs. Decker?
Aye.
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Ms. Press?
Motion passes 5-0. Agenda item 13, Mr. Evans.
Just a couple things. I've started informational tours in regards to the levy. I attended Brooklyn Heights Combined Men's and Women's Service Club meeting. Gary, you were there?
Yes, sir.
Some good questions came out of that. Some good suggestions came out of that. The suggestion for, to reopen the Saturday tours came out of that, and we're gonna do that. We're gonna, I'm working to make sure that we open up on a couple Saturdays and kind of take people, walk through, because that seems to be the number one question, is about the infrastructure, because people drive down 71st Street and see how nice the school looks, they come in, they see how clean our hallways are, and they don't understand that the pipes are still 80 years old underneath, so that's important. I was at Brooklyn Heights Village Council last night, I didn't get any questions from them. And then Valley View Senior Citizens, they grilled me for about 45 minutes. It was good, but I mean, you know, and I preface it with, I get that nobody wants to pay more taxes. Nobody's raising my hands and, yeah, I want to bond, but it's, you know, it ties into home values. We know that, and a lot of good questions came out of that, and a lot of clarifying things. So I think that, and that's the way I have to approach it, as an informational thing, because I told them I'm not pro-levy, I'm not anti-levy. I'm here to answer questions that you have about this ballot issue and what we've done operational-wise since we passed the last one. So I talked at great length last night at the levy committee meeting about the talk with the senior citizens and what questions they asked. You know, really a lot of good stuff about the embezzlements, and it was good because I was able to correct some timelines, because there's a group of people that believe that we passed the levy before the technology scandal was exposed. I said that's absolutely not true, because that's right when I came to work at Cuyahoga Heights. So I gave them the exact timeline on that. Talked through about some tax abatements and how they work, as well as some people. Lots of good conversations. And again, offered myself, I said, I will gladly come back. I talked to Alice yesterday. I said, Alice, I'll come back later if they have more questions. I said, but I would prefer them to ask me questions and false rumors to be spread. And that's what I've said to each group. I've got Brooklyn Heights Senior Citizens coming up here before too long, and Valley View's Combined Service Club at some point in time. And I'll be at Cuyahoga Heights, I think, next week for their village council, and I need to talk to Rick Sento about their seniors group, so.
Well, you did make an impression on my neighbor that I talked to yesterday, who did not have her children attend Cuyahoga Heights. But she was, understands and saw it with the open mind of what it really means and what it will mean for the district. You did impress on me.
Oh, good.
For sure. It was the
One more than I
person
thought I
talked
had
to.
coming out of there.
Well, she told me that you were hit hard for some people,
Yeah,
by
that's-
some people.
Yeah, That's the job, that's okay. Again, I'd rather answer the questions, and maybe it's an answer they don't like, than for false rumors to be spread. And I've said that at each group. I said, you know, the one gentleman that called me said, I'm not gonna support the levy because I don't wanna pay more taxes. And then he said, and then he had all these false things. I said, well, I'm gonna stop you. The first part of what you said to me, I can respect, that you don't wanna pay more taxes. I respect that. I disagree with you, but I respect that. But then you add on, none of those narratives are true. You need to go to the Ohio Lottery for more money. Well, you know, again, the whole lottery thing's still waving its ugly head out there. So, but you know, those are conversations that have to be had. There is no windfall from the Ohio Lottery. There is no windfall from the casinos. There's no, you know, it's what, $26,000 or something for the casinos, man.
Once the Browns win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So, you know that. But I'd rather have those conversations, and maybe somewhere down the road, Matt can come with me to talk about it, I can get some specific numbers, because they ask about the amount of embezzlement money that was recovered and that type of thing. So they went a whole lot of different directions, and
To me, it's like, I mean, everyone in the district who pays taxes for their property taxes, they have benefited from the appreciation of their homes over all these years. So yeah, they're paying taxes.
right.
And they will pay more taxes with the levy, but they need to see like what equity they've accrued over the years. And let's tie it back to that we have a, you know, exceptional school district that's helped those property values appreciate over the years.
And you're also the second lowest tax base in the county,
Right.
and even with the passage of this, would still be the second lowest by a large margin. So I talked about some of those numbers.
And the amount of money roughly that people are gonna be paying, particularly if their houses are valued around $350,000, is about the amount of money that the state of Ohio is giving every Cuyahoga Heights student. It's like $800.
Yeah.
Right.
I-
So you're asking us, the taxpayers, to give that equal amount a year? And so the real question should not be at us for the levy, but looking down to Columbus and how school funding is
Right,
taking place.
and that's, I said, believe me, I've written letters, I've talked to
decades.
legislators. I said, you know, if you really want some legislative change, you need to talk to legislators. Because, you know,
Of course, they don't go to the meetings.
right, but, you know, I said, listen, here, and I use it at every one, you know, we're gonna get just over $800 per student. Understand, and I down here, I said, you know, the Cuyahoga Heights kid that goes to St. Stanislaus gets $1,200 for him as a administrative fee. I said, so we don't even qualify for the same amount of money that the same kid is less to us. Why would our administrative fees be any less than St. Stanislaus?
Oh, and did you tell them we're paying for their transportation to go to school?
No, to top it, yeah,
Please
so.
tell them that too.
But so, I said, so those are the inequities, and what, you know, and some of those numbers are, and I try to limit it, but some of those numbers are eye-opening, you know? I said, hey, there's only 3 school districts in the state of Ohio that will get less than $1 million. Cuyahoga Heights, Put in Bay, Kelly's Island, and they all start laughing. And somebody says, well, it's because we're so small. I go, no, there's a lot of small schools out there that are getting well over $1 million, $2 million. I said, there's a lot of schools smaller than Cuyahoga Heights. We're not the third small school district in the state of Ohio. I said, but because of the funding formula, because they consider us a rich district, the state does, with that formula, so. And the last thing I want to throw in now, Mr. Burek's been working hard. We've got some, we have to start working on some ADA compliance issues. We've got a couple students in the elementary with wheelchairs. The elevator went down.
I'm gonna ask you that, we voted on this thing for the elevator maintenance.
The elevator just went down on us again. That elevator is antiquated but incredibly well cared for. The problem is that all the controls are analog. They're not digital controls. So I know last time they had it fixed, we had to get something we had to get a part out of California, like a plug or something out of California to keep the thing running. So, and you know, at some point in time, it catches up with you. So we're looking at some stair lifts and some things, but understand that remember way back when we talked about renovation of district, ADA compliance is high on that list of things to do, because we've got so many areas around. And I had a contractor come in and talk to us a little bit about renovating some of the bathrooms to make them a little bit more ADA compliant. So that's something that, regardless of what happens moving forward, that we're gonna have to find some money to make sure that, you know, we're taking care of some of those handicapped kids as well. And handicapped adults that come in the building at nights and evenings, that they have proper access to things, so. And when they built the buildings in 1936 and 1955, there was no consideration for any of that stuff. And you don't even think about it, but just the 3 stairs from by the kindergarten area up into where the pre-K is, kids with wheelchairs can't get up it. It's even at 3 stairs, it doesn't make any difference. They don't have the ability to get up that. So we're looking at some ramps and some lifts, so. George is.
Yeah, I was thinking, can you put a ramp there?
Yeah, we're looking at a ramp there, and then we're looking at a lift to go up. We're looking at a couple lifts in 2 different places. And we're working with the fire department on that too, because there's some, you want lifts that, I'm concerned about blocking the regular flow. So I want ramps that can kind of fold up and we're not in use. We have a vacuum track right now that's over here, because the last wheelchair student was over here. That's only good for getting the student down the stairs and then in the case of emergency. So, and our last student was a bigger student, so it wasn't one way. We have some small kids over there, like Mike Suey said, Tom, but honest to God, if something happened right now, we'd put a fireman on each side of the wheelchair and carry the student down the stairs. But the student that was here, they wouldn't have been able to do that with. But George has worked hard on putting some of that together, so we'll have to sit down. And maybe it's take a look at some of the safety money and divert some safety money, because it would qualify under the safety grant, and maybe where we thought about spending it in some other places, maybe make the radios do work for another year, and if this is more pressing on some of these things, so.
Does the state ever give money that could go towards ADA compliance projects?
If you yell loud enough, they might. We don't ever know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
One of the discussions in the superintendent's meeting today was, and Matt was teasing Mrs. Thrasher about it. If you look at House Bill 33, there's a lot of single cause. There's legislators got their line item things in there. One of the line item is that any of our guidance counselors 7 to 12 must go to a construction site to learn how a construction and get certified by about the potential careers in the construction industry. So technically, and I'm not wording that correctly, but
That's a new industry.
Holly and Audrey have to go to get their license. They're gonna have to go to a construction site, and they're gonna have to spend a day at a construction site and get a certificate saying that they understand. So that's how, I mean, that's the silliness of the state budget bill. And then the fact that the governor doesn't line item veto and take it out was a little frustrating as well. But I mean, there are those, the reading, we had a discussion about, you know, the science of reading. We've already trained some people. There's a caveat in there to reimburse staff members that got the reading, $1,200 or $400, but it doesn't say how they're gonna reimburse us for that. It says that they shall, but it doesn't. But then there's no mechanism. So obviously, it's working through legislative services, and it's like,
And
you know.
actually reimburses the school district.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just
In
a
administrator.
lot of head scratching stuff going on. So it's not.
Any other occupations or just construction?
No, of all the right, they just pick construction. That's just hilarious. But again, that's some construction company owner down in Arcanum, Ohio, whose best friend's the state representative, says, hey, we need more construction workers. You got to. So then he writes a line item that gets into the budget bill that the governor doesn't take out. That would have never mustered. It would have never got through as an individual. Just.
Keep it down there.
Well, just
So-
make sure she wears her hard hat.
Oh, that's headlines in Tom Talks with Audrey and Holly and hard hats, and then she knows the DiGeronimo family, so she wants to go down here to where they're building a new little shopping mall in Brecksville, so she can get firsthand look at the lore or whatever's going in down there. I don't know, but, so.
Is that the one that's across from Casablanca?
No, the one, yeah,
What's the shopping thing?
down where the Veterans Home where the Veterans Hospital used to be on Route 21.
Oh, you said Brexville, I thought you meant Independent.
No,
Oh,
yeah, well,
Di
Independent,
Girolamo was doing
Di
the
Girolamo was
project.
moving
Yeah,
down
yeah,
there,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they're moving down there
Yeah,
too
yeah,
as
yeah.
well, so,
What's that called, Valley something?
something, I don't know.
Valley something.
Unless there's any other comments for Mr. Evans, thank you. And we'll move on to agenda item 14, board policy review.
I will try to make this as short as possible. You've got 18 policies and one potential resolution. And this is all in response to House Bill 33. The vast majority of the 18 policies are in response to House Bill 33, which goes into effect October 3rd. So we want to have the most current policies in place. So the first is for you to consider this potential resolution for changes to board policies as a result of the Ohio Department of Education being dissolved and being rebranded as the Department of Education and Workforce. As Mr. Evans has talked about, there's going to be a director appointed by the governor, and he will have 2 deputy directors that will oversee secondary and elementary education and then career technical education. There's also going to be rebranding of the Department of Children and Youth and a director of that. And then most of the powers of the state board and the superintendent of public instruction are going to be going to the DO, the Department of Education Workforce Development. So basically, all that's going to be left for ODE is teacher licensure, employee conduct, overseeing background checks, and administering the teacher and school counselor evaluation system. That's about all you're going to have with the Ohio Department of Education. Everything else is going to fall under the political auspices of whoever the governor is. So what this is essentially doing is recognizing that that change is happening, and any reference to the Ohio Department of Education that would have been anything other than what ODE will be left with will now be assumed to be the DEW. So we're not going to have to go through and change 100 policies until it naturally changes over the course of time. So that's what this resolution does, is it gives you some time to for us to make appropriate changes. So we will clean that up if we don't hear back differently. We'll clean that up and make it an official resolution for the next meeting. The first policy we have here is the notice of meetings. Now, this was actually came back out in May. We're just now getting to it. This is really important, actually. The Records Commission, so every school district is required to have a Records Commission that's made up of the board president, the school district treasurer, and the superintendent. And that's established by Revised Code 149.41. And the commission is tasked with ensuring that a public entity properly stores and maintains its records, and when appropriate, takes the necessary steps to dispose of those documents legally. According to the law, the commission must meet annually to review applications for one-time disposal of obsolete records, as well as review schedules of records retention and disposition, which are submitted by any employee or district or ESC. You have to submit your schedule to the Ohio History Connection, which has a certain number of days to review it. State law further requires that before records are disposed of pursuant to an approved records retention schedule, the Records Commission is required to inform the Ohio History Connection of the disposal by submitting the record required certificates of disposal. And then they have another time period. So there's a process to dispose of records properly. And there are many, many, many categories of records we keep here. It says there are certain legal importances for this Record Commission's work. The commission helps to ensure that the district methodically reviews and also documents destruction of records. Further, there's some sunshine law implications. So these meetings have to be treated, this commission has to meet just as any other board committee would. So you'd have to have a public notice that you are going to be meeting, and it has to be communicated through traditional channels. So this is a policy that actually there were some records requests that were going around back in April and May, and that's what triggered the addition. You'll see there's a paragraph that's highlighted in green that's been added about the importance of the Records Commission. So something very important to consider. So that's the first one. I'll fly through the rest a little bit faster here. Bylaw 0141.2, conflicts of interest. What this does is it expands the scope of potential conflicts of interest. So when you get into the process of debating or voting for a contract, it's expanded what you may have to abstain from when it comes to avoiding a conflict of interest. So that paragraph you'll see has been added in green to that particular policy. Policy 2623.02 is a third grade reading guarantee. So what we see happening here, again, this is from House Bill 33, is a shift from where the parents and educators can make a decision to retain a child who does not meet third grade reading guarantee requirements for promotion to fourth grade. It's shifting now to the parent will make that decision, whether they want their child to be promoted or not if they do not meet the requirements of the third grade reading guarantee. Now, you can still retain students for behavioral concerns or some other factors, but if it comes to strictly the third grade reading guarantee of going from third to fourth grade, it's shifting the responsibility over now to the parent to make that decision, taking some of the responsibility out of our hands, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's what's happening. Other changes are going to require us to provide more intensive reading improvement and monitoring plans called a REMP. Tutoring and record keeping, that's going to have to occur there. And also, we have a directive that the intervention services that we implement have to be aligned to the science of reading. It's essentially the banning of the queuing system. We did a presentation about that back in May. So we've been out ahead of that quite a bit. So that's that particular policy. The next three, 3120.08, 4120.08, and then 8120, which is a little bit farther down. This is all about people who supervise students who are in our physical activities, like our coaches, for example. They're already required to get a pupil activity permit. House Bill 33 had an additional requirement that the sponsor or the coach must complete a student mental health training course in addition to sudden cardiac arrest and some of the other things that they're already required to complete. So this adds a mental health training that's going to be required of all of our coaches and sponsors of co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So there were three policies for that. So I just took care of three with one statement. 5113.01, this is intra-district open enrollment. That's not an issue here, but we're required to have a policy on it. All right, so House Bill 33 had some implications. Intra-district would mean if we had multiple elementary schools. And a student who lived in this part of the Brooklyn Heights, students attended a Brooklyn Heights elementary school in Valley View, attended the Valley View elementary school. Well, some school districts have lotteries where a Brooklyn Heights student can attend the Valley View school if there were open spots or vice versa. We don't have that issue, but we have to have a policy in place. So that's all that is. Okay? And I don't see us expanding our school district to multiple buildings in the future. Policy 5320, this is immunization. This reflects changes in immunization requirements, adjusting the age, grade level groupings of vaccines as recommended by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. You will see the statements in there about what can specifically, if a parent wanted to opt out of vaccines, exactly what criteria are listed there, and this is all aligned to the law, current law. So that's listed in this particular policy. 5330, this is use of medications. So House Bill 558 was passed into law back in January, and this expanded the agencies who are permitted to administer, purchase, possess, distribute, dispense, personally furnish, sell, or otherwise obtain or provide an overdose reversal drug, Narcan. We are not opting to store or have Narcan present. It is less than Mr. Evans says 2 minutes. I know it's less than 5 minutes response time from our safety forces who are trained and equipped to do that. So we did not select the Narcan option of this. If the board feels differently about it, certainly you can talk to Mr. Evans. A policy that we did not present would then, you have to have a separate policy for Narcan. So if you're going to administer it, then you have to have a Narcan policy, which we did not present here because we didn't opt for that. So, 5337, this is the care of students with seizure disorders. All right, this is part of House Bill 33. We've been aligned with most of this for quite a while, where every student who has been diagnosed with a seizure disorder has a seizure action plan, and that gets communicated to anybody who could come into contact with that student. So if it's a student with a disability, you've got the intervention specialist, you got the school nurse, the building principal, maybe the bus driver and a bus aide. This puts hard fast into law that each building in the district must have one individual who does not serve as a school nurse to be trained every 2 years in seizure care and implementation of plans. So this makes it a little bit more stringent. So in addition to those people, you have to have a point person in each building that's not a school nurse. Be trained extensively. Further, all administrators, guidance counselors, teachers, and bus drivers must complete 1 hour of in-person or self-study training on seizure disorders. So the self-study piece is interesting because we do public school works. And I believe, because it does say self-study, we'd be able to cover that through our annual public school works training that we do. So we will meet that law pretty easily. 6700 is the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. We talked about this before, and we have done a great job of aligning to this. This expands the rights granted by the Break Time for Nursing Mothers Act to include exempt employees of covered employers. This requires employers to provide a reasonable break time to for the mothers to express milk in a private location that is not a bathroom. And we have 2 dedicated rooms now, one in each distinct building that's not a bathroom. That Mrs. Rodriguez up in the Treasurer's Department worked with Mr. Zerbola and our maintenance staff to get those up and running. So very well aligned with that. Okay, we're getting there. 7440 is facilities security. They've expanded our detailing of the security measures that we put in place, and basically says that anybody who tries to circumvent those intentionally for malice can be disciplined, including employees. So nobody should be going in and disabling, the security alarm for the just so somebody can come in and do damage to the place. So this just outlines that a little bit deeper in that particular policy of what we do specifically that people could be subject to discipline for. 8210, you're going to hear more about this. This is the school calendar policy. Blizzard bags, I don't know if you even know what blizzard bags are. So once upon a time, schools were given 5 days that they were permitted for calamity, and if you went past those 5 days, you could use something called blizzard bags that could be used up to an additional 3 days, and you would give students basically at-home work to do. They would turn it in, and that would excuse you from 3 additional. State, about a decade ago, Mr. Evans switched to hours of instruction. So we have 1,001 hours at the high school. Kindergarten through, that's actually 7 through 12, and then 6th grade through, kindergarten through 6th grade is 910 hours of instruction. So we don't do days anymore, even though people think days. We're hours of instruction. We're about 21 days over the minimum requirement. And this law requires us to adopt a new plan because blizzard bags are gone, and we have to have basically a remote learning plan for up to 3 days that replace the blizzard bags. We would have to miss 3 weeks of school due to anything. It could be weather. It could be part of the building. We blew a transformer, and it's going to take a week to restore power. It could be an epidemic, just similar to what we had for COVID. We have to shut down for a week. If all of those lead to us using up our extra hours, and we cut into that 1,001 or 910, then we are required by law by August 1st of every year. This year it happens to be November. They're going to give us 1 month to develop this plan that would compensate for that. 8330 student records. This is just saying that if a student is to leave the district, we have to respond within 5 days to get student records transferred to the other school district. The only way you may be able to slow that process down is the student has an outstanding debt of $2,500 or more. However, if that student happens to be a student with a disability, and we're talking about retaining IEPs and things like that, you could find yourself down a legal rabbit hole. So, again, we comply better with this than people comply with us. We give records very easily. We don't always get records very easily when people come to our school district. 8600, 8650, these are transportation policy changes. And again, Mr. Evans will tell you, they're really, really making it hard for school districts to do the in lieu of payments. We're still able to do it for now, but there's really this push that if a child wants to go to a charter school, we're going to have to come up with a way to provide transportation without paying the families. We just have to do it. And so this is saying, well, you can purchase a van and you can transport up to 9 students in this van, and this van will undergo a certain amount of inspections, and the district will comply. Now, we already do this for our students who are outplaced with disabilities. That's not ever been a problem with us. It makes it a requirement. You can't do it in lieu of transportation for a student with a disability who goes to an outplaced school.
You can ask for a voucher.
Well, they also tell you that you can't deliver students late, so let's say we have a van and we're dropping off at three different charters.
Yep.
We have to make sure that none of those students are late, so in other words,
Yeah, so there are time restrictions in there, notification restrictions in there, and if you are found out of compliance on 2 or more occurrences, then the Department of Education and Workforce will withhold 100% of your transportation state funds
Do we have
until you are found to be by the DEW back in compliance. So.
I said, let's ask for a voucher.
Now, if you look at the criteria, there's certain criteria that you have to meet, and I think the second criterion is the one that excludes us from being required to implement that right now, and that is that we don't provide regular transportation to students going to private schools, because it's a hardship for our school district. We don't have the personnel, we don't have the vehicles.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because one of the criteria is that you may not stop on the roadway to load or unload passengers.
Yeah.
Like, of course you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, jump on in.
So if they take away the one, we'll just start doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Policy 9160, this is public attendance at school events. So, again, Mr. Evans has informed you that House Bill 33 required school districts to accept cash as an option of payment. And if you don't accept cash, then the person gets in free of charge. This policy memorializes that. So we've,
I didn't know that I could get them for free if they didn't.
yeah, so.
October 1st you can.
Oh.
Yeah, it's October 3rd, actually. It goes into effect, yeah. So on October 3rd, that's when this
back.
kicks in.
I will. Show up on October 3rd.
Policy 9211, we actually didn't go with the recommendation of Neola on this one. We chose not to check the box. We're a small school district, and we find that teachers, administrators, even school board members may be part of organizations such as your PTO or your band boosters or your athletic boosters. What they're trying to do is create a buffer that when you are a public figure and you're in these organizations, that you could have some conflicts of interest, or you could be handling money or making decisions that some people have found themselves, scrutinized for. But it's not recommended, it's only offered as a consideration. And because we are small, we have a lot of people that serve multiple roles here, and it didn't make sense to us to do that.
And anytime we think there's a potential conflict, we call John and we talk through it.
Yeah.
Please speak up if there is.
No.
There is
actually,
no
I talked to
conflict
John.
at all.
He said,
Yeah,
no,
I know.
there's
Nope,
that's.
not at all. And that's why this is just for consideration.
Yeah, that's a prime example.
Yep.
And we've forever had board members that were Boosters Club officers or
PTO,
PTO
treasurer, or
it's-
whatever.
It's just, that's.
That's one of the great things about our small district. Finally, 9270, this is actually a really big change. This is dealing primarily with our home education students. The law has changed that, before the district superintendent had to sign off on that. Now, if the parent says that I am going to homeschool my child, then within 5 days of that notification, the student does begin home instruction. There's no attendance requirements for the child. The subjects that they have to teach have been reduced to English, language arts, math, science, history, and government and social studies. No electives are going to be required. Parents are no longer required to meet certain qualifications to instruct their child, like a viable curriculum or any type of accountability. So even grades don't have to be given. So, and there's not even any minimum hours of instruction. We have 1,001 hours of instruction in a high school, but that's no longer required. The superintendent is required to send written notification that the notice has been received within 14 days. The law also modifies academic eligibility for participation in extracurricular activities. So a homeschooled student, as long as they didn't go from traditional school and become ineligible, and then go to homeschool, they won't automatically become eligible until the next season changes. But once they're eligible, there are no more grade requirements for eligibility like there are for students who attend your traditional brick and mortar schools. So this could be very significant for districts across Ohio. Just another option if you want to take a voucher, go to a charter school, or just stay home. And you can get your education.
Is this like what other states do? Like, is that why they?
No, this.
I don't know that anybody
this
does
is-
what
no,
Ohio
this is-
does.
Or like,
This is insanity. This is just crazy, because until,
there's like no.
there were some safeguards in there, and now we have, I think we have 4 families, but if you go down that kind of Medina Buckeye area, they have huge numbers of homeschool kids in that district out there, so this just kind of takes, they can do Wild Wild West, they're gonna do what they want to anymore,
And Mr. Evans had set a set of links, I think last week in your Friday packet that previewed all these policies, but there was a legal alert about homeschool or home education. It's changing to home education, not homeschooling. It's changing to home education. There's a nice legal alert you might want to read just so you can be current on the definitions and exactly how the law is changing. And I think I sent you 7 legal alerts, actually. So, but that's it. That's all I have. These are first readings, all for consideration, and that's only going to leave us with 1 or 2 more policies the rest of the fall. So I've taken care of board policy season.
so they get back after the 1st of January and start getting goofy again, start
Yeah.
finding stuff out, so. Because the legislators will be on recess for re-election, so.
Okay.
That's
If
it.
there are questions for Mr. Young, otherwise we will thank you very much, Mr. Young. And any questions directed to Mr. Young? Let's move on to agenda item 15, board committee reports, comments. Does the board, any members have anything for the greater good tonight? Okay.
Just very briefly, I had asked that we consider moving the October meeting. I'm canceling that request, so.
So our first meeting in October
First meeting
is
in
October
October.
the 4th?
4th, I think,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Remains what it
that's
is.
back on, and there's no need to look at our calendars or make any adjustments.
Right.
Okay. All right, so future agenda items, I don't know that we have anything on the docket here tonight. So it should be noted that Board of Education members receive their agendas prior to the actual meeting. Oh, that's right. Is there I mean, I didn't know if this is
We,
scheduled.
I'm sorry, we were discussing something that's going on in Valley View that night.
Oh, the night of,
Our board meeting,
oh, okay, the first meeting in October.
yes, it's a Meet the Candidates Night
Oh, okay,
forum for the mayoral and the council candidates
gotcha.
in Valley View, so
Okay,
we'll be here and not there.
okay.
Will that be taped, or it might be?
No, they're doing it up in Valley View. I doubt it.
It'll be live. We'll just have to take a recess. When it gets really interesting, somebody can knock on the
Tell
window.
Sean to take his phone.
Yeah,
Chad.
yeah. Somebody FaceTime me.
Sorry, I'm sorry
That's
to
right.
interrupt.
So moving on to 17A, it should be noted the Board of Education members receive their agendas several days prior to the actual meeting, thus leave a considerable opportunity to study it, ask questions, et cetera. Upcoming regular meetings, September 20th, Wednesday, September 20th at 7 PM, Wednesday, October 4th at 6 PM, and Wednesday, October 18th at 7 PM. And with that, I make a motion that we adjourn to executive session pursuant to ORC Section 121.22G1 for the purpose of concerning the evaluation of our district treasurer. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Sajaki seconds. No need for discussion, so let's move to a vote, please.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Mr. Sajaki.
Aye.
Mrs. Decker.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Ms. Kraus.
Motion passes 5-0. It's 8:46 PM, and we are adjourned to executive session. No action will be taken after we reconvene.
Gary, I'm sorry, did you say for your comment that we did not have to move the October 4th meeting?
Right.
Correct.
Okay,